I've been having a lot of fun going back through Acts again and seeing all these different things I can pick up as it relates to church planting and spreading the gospel. And as always, Acts is full of a bunch of awesome things, but I just want to hone in on three things that I found really in three different chapters 15, 16, and 19. And the first observation I made, just as it comes to church planting and Christian ministry, is that Christians are allowed to have disagreements and we're allowed to have arguments. We just have to learn how to do it well. So I think that chapter 15, we see the Jerusalem Council. There was a problem confronting the church. I think they did a great job of getting together and trying to get to the bottom of this issue and really figure out what is it exactly that God has commanded us and how can we move forward in this way. So I thought that was a great example of conflict resolution. It's interesting just later in that chapter, though, that you see Paul and Barnabas end up splitting ways because of an argument over John Mark. And I wish that we got more detail about that argument, exactly why they did that, and if they parted kind of on good terms or not. I think there's evidence in the scripture later that Paul kind of came around to seeing John Mark as useful again. But even there, I think that we see, okay, Christians are allowed to have arguments. We're allowed to have a difference of opinion over things like even who should be on our team. But the major thing that's important is that the gospel goes forward. And that's really my second big point, is that the gospel has to take priority. We see this in the Jerusalem Council when the decision that they come to is really, we're not going to make people be circumcised because we don't want to put any burden in their way that could hinder this moving forward. And however, the next chapter you get to in chapter 16, it starts off with Paul circumcising the Gentile Timothy. Which is really interesting, right? Because we just got through this whole chapter saying, no, the Gentiles don't have to be circumcised. And then we start off the next chapter with Paul, who's one of the strongest advocates of not having Gentiles circumcised, circumcising Timothy. And we see that they did this because he knew about the people in that area and that it was going to be important for them that Timothy was circumcised if they were going to listen to him as they brought the gospel that way. And so really out of all this, we see the gospel takes priority. It's not about circumcision or uncircumcision. It's about doing whatever is necessary to move the gospel forward. And then in terms of moving the gospel forward, I also saw something really interesting in chapter 19 about barriers to the gospel. And we see this when they were in Ephesus and the riots started. And we see it really started over two things. It was over greed and pride. The people that made the idols were in that business. They didn't want to lose all the money that they were making off the idols. And we also see it was their pride. They appealed to the fact that, hey, we're going to lose our prestige because we have the temple of Artemis and people aren't going to think we're that great anymore if people stop worshiping idols. And so these are two areas that we really need to attack in our own lives and that we need to fight and pray against as we take the gospel out into new frontiers.